Hey everyone. Too many stories coming across my feeds and in my practice to ignore. So many of these stories are sad stories. Now, I'm a firm believer that no one knows their baby more than a parent. And it's my hope that the work of tongue tie experts will empower and educate families and providers. Notice I didn't say the goal is to have more tongue tie procedures. That's not what I think. This is about education, instinct, and making informed decisions. So let's talk about the sad stories, which I hear daily on social and in emails and messages. Parents are being told that their instincts aren't correct. They know something is wrong, and many times they know it's tongue tie that's causing their breastfeeding problems, but they are being told that it's not. You can listen to previous episodes of this podcast for parents' stories. There are examples of difficult journeys. By sharing what can happen when tongue tie is missed or mistreated, we will hopefully give the next family hope to fight back and learn for themselves, research, pursue the information that their care providers aren't aware of. Don't you wish that this didn't have to be? It shouldn't be on the parents, right? But unfortunately, many types of medical providers who haven't learned enough about tongue tie are dismissing parent instincts, sometimes with disastrous results. Pediatricians, even IBCLCs, and other lactation professionals are dismissing parenting instincts because they haven't learned enough yet. It has to stop. Parents need to be believed. Your instinct as a parent matters, and your breastfeeding matters. It is so hard to know the right thing to do to stand up for yourself and your infant at such a vulnerable time, but it can literally be life-changing. My hope is that work such as my own will educate and empower families about breastfeeding and other parenting concerns. Social media isn't always the best place to learn, but it is often where families turn and where professionals turn for networking. Now, as I sit here speaking, I'm not sitting here as someone who always knew about tongue tie. As I often repeat, this isn't taught in school. I didn't learn about this in school. I have 3 medical degrees. I'm an RN, a midwife, and an IBCLC, and 2 New York licenses to practice as an RN, registered nurse, and as a midwife. And if my education about tongue tie totaled an hour, I'd be exaggerating. And even what I did learn didn't teach me how to guide families through the assessment, diagnosis, decisions, and care needed while giving breastfeeding support. So, you know what I did learn? I often, I talk about this in passing, but I think it's important for families to understand and for professionals to know that when I talk about not learning about tongue tie, I don't mean not learning about anterior tongue tie. So we learn about the most obvious form of tongue tie, which is anterior tongue tie, which is when the tongue is attached at the very tip. And it's very difficult to move it. And when you do move it, it makes a heart shape. So that is where the biggest education went. That's where the attention of our tongue tie education went. And we learned a little bit about it may interfere with feeding, it may interfere with speech, but not necessarily, right? So we didn't learn. We know there's much more than anterior tongue ties that affect breastfeeding, but that's all I learned in school, in all the levels of my education. Now, when I went a little bit further after, when I had my IBCLC, I did learn that there were other types of tongue tie that were being investigated or researched, but not too much more than that, right? So this is the baseline that the doctors, the nurses, the medical professionals have. And when they're telling you that there is no tongue tie, that's what they mean. They mean there is no anterior tongue tie. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit about what's going on. So it's time for me to go back in my Wayback Machine, and I want to come clean. I want to let everybody realize that I'm not preaching. I'm not holier than thou. I did not always get this right. And I'd like to share with you about the week that I almost quit. It was hands down the worst week in my lactation practice. And if you're a provider, I'd love to know if you've ever felt this way, ever in your practice. Seriously, that week I felt useless. I had 3 babies in my office in 1 week that I couldn't help with my lactation skills. I tried all my tricks. I tried different positions. I tried getting moms to, get their milk out, flow easier. I tried nipple shields. I tried everything that I knew how to use, everything that I had learned so far, and nothing works. I felt like a failure. Not an easy place to be in if you're a medical provider, if you can't help the person that comes to you for help. And it gets worse. One of the moms had asked me if I thought her baby had a tongue tie, and I dismissed her concerns. Yes, I felt awful, and I still feel embarrassed when I think about it. I hadn't learned yet, and I didn't know how to advise them. I'm so sorry to those who came to me at that time. And honestly, I've seen people for subsequent babies, and I've apologized to them. I apologized for what I didn't know, and I shared with them what I knew now. And it was a healing experience for myself and for them. But, there's a happy ending to this story. The good news is I didn't give up. That query from that parent sent me on a journey of research, networking, and practice change. Now my favorite quote is Maya Angelou's, "Do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better." This applies to parents as well as professionals. One day I'll tell you the stories of my failed breastfeeding journeys with my own kids. I didn't get this right, which helps to add to my compassion with those to whom I serve. We know better, we do better. But one of the light bulbs that went off on my learning journey was this. As medical professionals, we need to have interdisciplinary learning. We learn in silos, meaning doctors learn from doctors, nurses learn from nurses, midwives learn from midwives, and so on. Well, we've learned in silos long enough. To treat most human conditions, we need to be able to work in teams. That's what being holistic and integrative means, right? We can't just look at the part of one person. We can't just look at the part of the dyad. Especially crucial for breastfeeding. The treatment of tongue tie requires a team, and teams need to learn together. We need to understand each other's points of view. We need to understand each other's lingo and language, and that requires us learning together. And that includes lactation professionals, dentists, doctors, speech-language pathologists, nurses, doulas, childbirth educators, midwives, chiropractors, occupational therapists, physical therapists, craniosacral therapists, etc. Forgive me if I've left anyone out. Anyone who cares for pregnant or breastfeeding parents or kids or young kids who are struggling. We all need to understand each other. We all need to understand each other's roles, understand the language that we speak so that we can communicate with each other. And we need to be able to network with each other and form teams wherever we are. We all need to learn in the same room, whether in person or virtually, depending where that room is. And there are a few organizations where this is happening, and it is amazing. Organizations such as ICAP, IATP, American Laser Study Club, Airway Circle, which I've just recently joined. There are groups, the Airway Revolution Foundation. There are many groups that are forming, more and more groups that are forming, where professionals learn together. And again, forgive me if I've left any out. And if there are any I don't know about, let me know. I want to know. I want to be able to have these resources for people. Most courses, however, on the topic are geared to one profession or another. This is changing as well, but most coursework, most educational offerings are for one type of provider or another. So the course I offer, the Professional's Guide to Tongue Tie in the Breastfeeding Infant, is interdisciplinary for this very reason. We have conversations inside the group that teach us how to speak each other's languages, learn together, network, and treat as a team, as it should be. Just to summarize, as a professional, it is vital to learn more than you were taught in formal schooling. I get sad stories every day of families who are failing to meet their feeding goals, infants who are suffering because of missed or mistreated tongue ties. If you're a professional, families need you to understand oral restrictions. If you're a parent who isn't finding answers, I encourage you to join local breastfeeding or tongue tie groups, or join our Facebook group, Breastfeeding Tongue Tie Babies. Great place to network, great place to find providers in your area and get support of other parents and professionals. If you need further help and if you're not on Facebook or you can't get in the group, you can definitely message me. You can always email me at lisa@lisapalladino.net. The links for everything I mentioned will be in the show notes, including if you have a tongue tie story that you wish went differently. If you have a tongue tie story that you wish went differently, feel free to share with me. Perhaps you can come on the podcast and tell your story. If you are a professional who feels that you need education and networking, please consider Professional's Guide to Tongue Tie in the Breastfeeding Infant, or any course or organization that will get your journey about tongue tie moving forward. The link to my course will be in the show notes as well, but it's tonguetieexperts.net/professional course. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week.